Cruel words have a way of echoing long after they're spoken. "You're nothing without me." That line, thrown like a knife, cut deeper than any blade. It was said with such cold certainty that, for a fleeting moment, it almost felt true. Almost. The sting of those words didn't fade with time. They became fuel, a reminder etched into memory, shaping every thought and every plan that followed. Before I take you further into this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue bringing you stories like this. Standing in a boardroom of glass years later, I watched reflections bounce back at me, my own face among the towering walls of ambition and power. The table was lined with people who now looked to me for answers, guidance, vision. Yet even in that moment of authority, I remembered the humiliation that had once threatened to shatter me. The sneer, the condescension, the certainty that I was destined to fail. The memory wasn't a weakness anymore. It was an anchor, reminding me why I stood where I did. The betrayal hadn't been sudden. It was deliberate, calculated. My ex-partner didn't just walk away. They stripped everything in their path. Support I thought unshakable vanished. Dignity was torn apart piece by piece in public, each loss orchestrated with precision. I was left broken, discarded like a pawn in a game I didn't know I was playing. But what they didn't understand was that brokenness has a way of becoming unbreakable once it's rebuilt. Humiliation is heavy. It settles in the bones, lingers in whispers, and haunts in the silence of night. I heard the doubts spoken behind closed doors, the laughter at my expense, the pity disguised as concern. And yet, every cruel remark fed the quiet fire inside me. It taught me to endure, to wait, to sharpen patience into a weapon. Revenge was never about anger. It was about balance, about setting the scales right again. So I learned silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence before a storm. Outwardly, I appeared calm, composed, even indifferent. I smiled when expected, bowed when necessary, played my role with elegance. Beneath the surface, rage coiled like a serpent, waiting to strike. My mask became my shield, and my shield became their downfall. They thought they had buried me. In truth, they had planted me. From that soil of betrayal, something unexpected grew. What was meant to destroy me became the seed of destiny. I built carefully, brick by brick, an empire founded on lessons carved from scars. Every decision, every alliance, every calculated risk was guided by the memory of being told I was nothing. And as the empire rose, I whispered only to myself, "She thought I would break." Instead, I built an empire. They always underestimated me. That was my first advantage. I wore calm like a second skin, a mask so practiced that no one thought to look beneath it. They mistook silence for weakness, patience for submission, but under the still surface, there were currents sharp enough to cut through steel. Every slight, every condescending smile, every stolen opportunity. I carried them, not as wounds, but as weapons waiting for their moment. The one I called a partner thrived on charm that dazzled the unsuspecting. A smile that could disarm a skeptic, words smooth enough to weave loyalty out of thin air. To most, they seemed a leader, a visionary who pulled strings with ease. But I saw the arrogance coiled behind the charisma, the hunger for control that left no space for trust. To them, partnership was just another word for ownership. At first, I believed we were building something together. Long nights of plans and promises painted the illusion of shared purpose. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to see the cracks. Every effort I made was met with unseen sabotage, a call that was never returned, a deal that mysteriously fell apart, opportunities diverted into their waiting hands. Support was only a shadow. Behind it, sabotage thrived. The illusion finally shattered with failure. Not mine alone, but ours. Yet when the dust settled, they stepped aside, stripping away the mask of partnership with a cruelty sharper than the loss itself. Their words cut not just through pride, but through the fabric of trust I had once clung to. The failure stung, but it was the revelation that lingered, the certainty that I had never been standing beside an ally, only beneath a puppeteer's strings. That certainty crystallized in a single line, spoken with venom designed to leave scars. "You're nothing without me." A verdict, a sentence, and a challenge all at once. For a breath, it hollowed me, echoing louder than reason, louder than memory. But once the words settled, they became something else entirely. Not a chain, not a wound, fuel. I swallowed the humiliation in silence. Let them think they had silenced me. Let them believe the storm had passed. I lowered my eyes, bowed my head, and accepted their triumph with composure. Yet every beat of my quiet heart hammered strategy into shape. In the stillness, something was forming. Silence became not submission, but shelter for a storm that was gathering its strength. From that silence, a vow was born. Not one spoken aloud, not one shouted in anger. It was forged in the still heat of resolve, tempered by reason rather than rage. Intelligence would be my weapon, patience my blade. If they thought I had been playing the game by their rules, they would soon discover I was writing my own. She believed she had ended me. She believed the words she hurled had buried me beneath the rubble of failure. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was that she had only given me a reason to begin. And from that reason, from that vow, a destiny far greater than her imagination would take root. He began in the shadows, where no one thought to look. While the world believed him defeated, he studied relentlessly, absorbing knowledge from failures that others mocked. Each setback became a lesson, each humiliation a blueprint for how not to fall again. He sought out mentors quietly, networked, with precision, and built connections like a mason laying bricks in the dark. Every insult she had thrown, every ounce of dignity stripped from him, became fuel. He did not rush, because he knew revenge was not born in haste. It was built in silence, one careful step at a time. Her voice followed him like a ghost, taunting from memory. He recalled her mocking words when she claimed his victories as her own, smiling sweetly while planting knives in his back. He remembered the stolen credit, the way she paraded success that had been carved from his effort. These memories did not weaken him, they sharpened him. The betrayal was no longer an open wound, it was a whetstone against which his strategy was honed. Rage might have burned out quickly, but what betrayal left behind was something more enduring: resolve. Looking back, the red flags were obvious. The subtle digs dressed as jokes, the meetings he was never invited to, the way she kept allies close only to use them as stepping stones. What he once excused as flaws in a friend or partner revealed themselves as deliberate cruelty. She had never stumbled by accident. Her sabotage had been deliberate from the start. Realizing this, the past rewrote itself before his eyes, and every detail that once seemed harmless became proof of her intent. Meanwhile, as she flaunted her new life, basking in applause and wealth, he kept building. Quietly, methodically, he stacked each brick of his empire where no one could see. While she lived for spectacle, he thrived in obscurity. Each connection was chosen with care, each alliance forged in trust she had long since lost. He built not to impress, but to endure, and in that silence, his foundation grew unshakable. To her, his absence was proof of defeat. She laughed at the thought that he might rise again if she thought of him at all. Her arrogance convinced her he was gone, erased by her betrayal. Yet behind the curtain of her ignorance he grew stronger, invisible but unstoppable. The longer he stayed unseen, the greater his reach became. His invisibility was not weakness, it was cover. Her blindness was her undoing. She dismissed him as a failed chapter in her story, an irrelevant name forgotten at the bottom of a page. She did not see the storm tightening around her, did not hear the whispers of his return. Arrogance had made her careless, and in that carelessness she sealed her fate. He no longer burned with anger when he thought of her. Time had transformed his rage into something colder, sharper. Memory guided him like a compass, not toward destruction, but toward precision. Every insult, every stolen victory was catalogued, not to relive pain, but to calculate the exact way balance would be restored. His revenge was no longer about making her suffer. It was about reclaiming what was his and proving that silence had been his greatest weapon. And so, in the quiet he had chosen, an empire was born. Not loud, not boastful, but immovable. Every empire begins with silence. His began the day she told him he was nothing. Now, as he stood atop what he had built, he understood that those words had not broken him. They had built him. What she believed had been an ending had only ever been the beginning. The first sign of her attention came in the form of headlines. The business world buzzed with his meteoric rise, the kind of success that couldn't be ignored. Profits soared, alliances solidified, and every achievement whispered his name in corners where she once thought she ruled. Greed and regret tugged at her carefully constructed pride, and against her better judgment, she found herself drawn back into the orbit she had once tried to destroy. The irony was delicious. She had underestimated him, and now the spotlight made him irresistible. Her return carried the same arrogance that had once cut so deep. She smiled with calculated charm, speaking as though the past never existed, as though every betrayal, every slight, had been forgotten. Confidence dripped from her every gesture, a mask designed to attach herself to his triumph and reclaim influence she no longer earned. She believed she was stepping back into power, but she failed to notice that the rules of the game had changed. He welcomed her with a calm he had perfected over years of quiet preparation. His smile was polite, his demeanor unshakable, but beneath, amusement glimmered. He listened as she boasted, reminisced, and subtly hinted at partnership, each word analyzed, each gesture catalogued. Nothing escaped him. Patience had taught him that control lay in observing, not reacting, in letting her miscalculations reveal themselves in time. Every conversation became a stage, and he orchestrated it with subtlety. Every compliment he offered, every suggestion he made was calculated to reinforce her assumptions, to let her arrogance guide her steps. He planted ideas in her mind that seemed natural, steering her into decisions she believed were hers alone. In her confidence, she didn't realize she was walking into a trap of her own making, crafted with precision from memory and meticulous planning. Inevitably, she overreached. Deals were signed, secrets revealed, and alliances pledged, all under the guise of collaboration. Each action, every confident gesture, became a thread in the net he was weaving. She believed she was gaining leverage, consolidating power, and proving her superiority. In truth, she was unraveling herself, unaware that her own hand was feeding the machinery of her downfall. Her entitlement became her undoing. The mask of charm faltered in small ways. Gestures that had once been unseen now exposed her greed and manipulation to anyone willing to observe. Her confidence blinded her to subtle warnings, to the careful record-keeping, to the strategic patience that had been built over years. Each misstep was a brick laid in the foundation of her ruin, one she could not perceive until it was too late. He had waited, silent and patient, as her mistakes accumulated. Every public blunder, every ill-considered boast, every revealing deal was catalogued, carefully preserved. The empire he had built thrived in silence, but it had never been idle. The pieces were in place, each error recorded, each opportunity noted, until the moment to strike became inevitable. Her overconfidence had done the work for him. When the fall came, it was complete and undeniable. She stepped forward, convinced, of triumph, only to realize too late that she had walked into her own undoing. Every move she had made, every scheme she thought concealed, was revealed with precision. He stood composed, untouchable, the architect of a justice that required no anger, only careful orchestration. She had believed she was entering his empire, but in reality, she had entered the snare she had built for herself, and in that realization, her world collapsed. Every piece had been set with deliberate care. Every conversation, every meeting, every gesture designed to align with the moment he had been building toward for years. He had waited patiently, allowing her arrogance and greed to guide her own hand. Now, in this precise high-stakes moment, her betrayal, the one she believed buried, would surface exactly where he intended. The trap was no longer theoretical. It was alive, ready to snap. Every observer, every participant unknowingly played a role in revealing the truth, and he watched with composed anticipation. His movements were deliberate, yet they appeared effortless to those around him. Deals were closed with ease, decisions made with the poise of someone untouched by past wounds. Yet each step had been calculated, every interaction carefully considered to manipulate circumstance without ever showing intention. It was as if fate itself had bent to his design, guiding her and everyone else toward the inevitable revelation she could not escape. Subtle cracks began to appear in her confidence. The smiles she once wore so easily faltered under scrutiny. Hesitation seeped into her tone. She sensed, even dimly, that the balance of power had shifted. The control she had wielded effortlessly now eluded her grasp, replaced by uncertainty she had never experienced. The predator had become prey, and she could feel it in the tightening of her chest, the pause in her speech, the flicker of doubt she could not hide. Every scheme she had executed, every manipulation she had orchestrated, now reflected back upon her. Words meant to deceive and charm were twisted into evidence against her. Actions intended to elevate her reputation became proof of her hypocrisy. The mirror of truth revealed her as she had truly been all along, and the audience, investors, colleagues, and peers witnessed the revelation in real time. Her carefully constructed image crumbled under the weight of her own machinations. The man she had mocked and underestimated now stood untouchable. His patience, precision, and methodical strategy had transformed him into a figure of authority and inevitability. Where she had seen weakness, there was strength. Where she had seen submission, there was command. Each move she had made to manipulate him now bolstered his position, turning her own arrogance into a tool for his ascension. The exposure was crushing. Alliances she had relied upon faltered, secrets she had hidden were revealed, and whispers of her duplicity spread through the circles she once dominated. Every glance, every murmured conversation became a testament to her collapse. She was left cornered, her influence evaporating as those who had followed her began to see the truth. She had overstepped, and the consequences were absolute. Even in the final moments before any verdict was pronounced, the silence spoke volumes. Gasps of recognition, stifled whispers of disbelief, and the quiet realization that there was no way to salvage her position signaled her irreversible downfall. He did not gloat, did not speak. The silence carried the weight of justice, letting her unraveling speak for itself, confirming the full measure of her defeat without a single word from him. And there it stood, the empire that had been forged from patience, intelligence, and unyielding determination. The structure he had built in the shadows now mirrored her ruin, a reflection of all she had underestimated and dismissed. The empire she once mocked was not only his triumph, it was a testament to the precision of his strategy and the inevitability of her consequences. The man she had sought to destroy had risen, and the mirror of his empire reflected her downfall with ruthless clarity. The aftermath of her hubris was absolute. Every scheme she had relied upon to maintain control crumbled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Her arrogance, once a shield, had become the instrument of her undoing. Financial ruin shadowed her every move. Alliances dissolved under the weight of her exposed manipulations, and the influence she had wielded so effortlessly vanished into irrelevance. The whispers that followed were not of sympathy or understanding, but of astonishment at how completely her world had collapsed. She had believed herself untouchable, but in her overconfidence, she had sown the seeds of her own destruction. He, on the other hand, ascended quietly, letting the triumph speak through action rather than proclamation. There was no need for fanfare, no desire for vindictive declaration. Every success, every empire carefully built, bore witness to his resilience. Silence became his most powerful statement. The world recognized the magnitude of his achievement without him uttering a single word. Composure defined him, and in that calm, there was undeniable power, one that spoke louder than any confrontation or insult ever could. Every calculated move, every patient strategy had outmaneuvered her arrogance at every turn. Methodical and precise, he had anticipated her cruelty and waited for her mistakes, allowing them to multiply in effect without intervention. Where she had relied on impulsive domination, he relied on intelligence and observation. The subtle patterns of her hubris were his roadmap, and by the time she recognized the consequences, it was already too late. Every victory had been planned, every downfall orchestrated with an invisible hand that only he controlled. Surrounded by respect, influence, and the independence he had longed to reclaim, he stood unshaken. The empire he had built in silence now radiated a quiet glory that no one could undermine. His reputation, forged through resilience and cunning, commanded deference, and his achievements spoke for themselves. The past, the betrayals, the venomous words, these no longer held power over him. They had been transformed into instruments of insight, shaping the man he had become and the legacy he now owned. In the final reflection, the truth of his journey crystallized. She had once told him he was nothing without her, a verdict he had carried silently for years. Yet when she returned, seeking to reclaim what she thought she had destroyed, the world already bore witness to the reality he had created, a life of mastery, respect, and undeniable achievement. She had underestimated the quiet strength of patience and intelligence, and in that misjudgment, her irrelevance had been sealed. He had become everything without her, and in that, the ultimate victory was complete.